Ordinance was prepared to overrule this. Public anger forced somebody to go and tear up that ordinance when the Prime Minister was in Washington. It was a sorry day for India that we had to see such a sight, but I think it was a proud moment for the Indian people that they had brought the government to heel. So, when our political system realizes that the people of India will not allow work to be stalled, a government who is in office legitimately by popular vote has the right to do what they want to do, including the right to do something which history may prove to be wrong. 5 years later, when they come back to us, we will take them to task. If you think they are doing something wrong, say so. Don't prevent everybody from saying what he wants. And disruption of Parliament achieves exactly that. Are we in a dismal situation? I don't think so. I think Indian democracy is becoming noisier by the day. Indian democracy is becoming transparent by the day. No institution, as I started by saying, no institution is sacrosanct. Indian political system today is becoming alive to the truth of public opinion being the ultimate master, and becoming alive to the reality of public opinion being fickle, from populism, from popularity to unpopularity is nowadays a very short journey. Ultimately, it's we, the people of India, who have to keep democracy alive. Parliament will not keep democracy alive. As Mr. Palkhiwala wrote in his book, democracy is a ceaseless endeavor. It is not a safe harbor. So, till the spark of democracy remains in our hearts, our institutions will be compelled to work. The logjam of today will become hopefully an anecdote of tomorrow, and we will move ahead. And I say this on the faith of a very interesting episode cited by Mr. Nariman in his book, of a conversation between the two ambassadors when America was at civil war. The French, who always considered themselves superior to most other races, the French ambassador asked the American ambassador, "What is to happen of your great republic?" And his answer was, "Your Excellency, our republic shall always do well as long as our leaders aspire to the ideal set by our founding fathers." Thank you.
Question answer session. Questions from the audience? Yes, sir.
I thought you might be coming up with some structural possibilities and changes and modifications that we may need in our country and in our constitution perhaps, which would help us through this gridiron that constantly hounds us in every parliament for at least the last 5 of them. So, but what you're saying is really it's up to the people, and ultimately, to core.
Attempted to structure the Constitution have always ended up making it worse off. The founders of our founding fathers, the members of the Constituent Assembly, deliberately left great latitude in our Constitution. Let me give you one example which is of contemporary importance. They deliberately, in our original preamble, said, we give to ourselves a democratic republic. They didn't use the word socialist. Why? Because they said the generations who come must have the liberty to govern themselves the way they want to govern themselves. A structural change has to come through Parliament. If Parliament realizes the importance of functioning smoothly, we will not need that structural change. And if they don't, no structural change can happen. Yes, sir.
Salve said regarding the functioning of our parliament. I'm here. I think the comparison that you drew between the Indian Parliament and the Westminster Parliament, I think, is well taken. But one critical difference is that our presiding officers, the two houses, actually, in one way, they are different from the presiding officers of the Houses of Parliament in Westminster House of Parliament. The reason being, they actually come, they reach a phase in their career after which they have nowhere to go. And that is really what gives them the authority and the fact that they'll continue as long as they do. Regarding the gridlock in the Parliament, there are provisions in the procedures of the houses, both houses, that the moment a member of Parliament enters the well of the House, he is automatically suspended. And this particular fact that the procedure exists, actually acknowledged by the speakers themselves. The fact that these procedures are not applied, basically, to me it appears that presiding officers are not being effective in governing the House that ought to. And I think the major reason why this gridlock or the blockage occurs is the fact that the procedures are actually not being applied properly. And that's something, in fact, even the debate which took place recently when the speakers, presiding officers met in Lucknow, they were all actually, there's ambiguity about this whole issue. So I think what really is the solution, as I can see now, is that this procedure can be enforced, it exists, and the public debate on this issue doesn't take place. What happens when you have the media discussion, they actually fall, in a way, a victim to the general public debate about the issue over which the Parliament being blocked. And in that sense, there is an equivalence drawn between the blockage of Parliament and the issue over which the Parliament being blocked. Whereas the most critical thing is the Parliament must not be blocked, and this is one way of doing it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
You officers of the Westminster Parliament in UK and India, there is a convention in the UK that once you down the roads of the Speaker, you just walk into the sunset after that. The UK doesn't have a written constitution. This convention is honored. There is nothing which prevents our Parliament from having a similar convention. This is the most important example of conventions being respected and considered sacrosanct and becoming the cornerstone of governance in the United Kingdom, where they don't have a written constitution. And I think if we can inculcate that spirit into ourselves, that is the ultimate solution, including what you're saying, policing the House. The Speaker has absolute power to remove any member from the House who is preventing the working of the House. You can't run the House on a day-to-day basis throwing people out. That is really where the logjam comes from.
Yes, sir.
Sir, I wanted, the damage done is much more than what has been given in economic terms. Imagine the damage done for power generation. Imagine the damage done for loss of labor power and others. That is one issue. Second issue, which you are very well known, sir, I request if you can name the author who started the retrospective tax issue and what is the kind of damage that you have done, not only here, but worldwide, as I was standing as a nation. Thank you, sir.
I can only tell you the distribution of natural resources, and you only mentioned coal. The distribution of natural resources in India is utterly opaque, and the damage done to this country over the decades by the opaque distribution of natural resources is scandalous. If you add to coal the loss caused by handing over iron ore mines, bauxite mines, and so on and so forth, to companies who get our resources, your and my resources free, and sell their products at market price. The figures of the coal scam will look extremely small. But this is where transparency is coming into the system. And I think we have now set on a course which is irreversible. Coming to the retrospective amendment, we all know who the author of the retrospective amendment was. But I was speaking on this last week in London at a function organized by the Bingham School of Law. And they were also very keen to know, and it's very interesting. The drop in FDI is significant. But from 2011 to 2015, the government which with such fanfare, bells and whistles, brought the retrospective law, has not had the courage to send a demand notice to Vodafone.
General Khanna, sir.
The country actually is in a state of law of the jungle. Our existence day to day is the law of the jungle. That is a fact. And the people who are living in a state of law of the jungle elect people who come into the parliament and conduct themselves as being a representative of the law of the jungle. You know that the cases that are outstanding in the courts, it will take us a couple of 100 years for them to be finalized. You know the indiscretions of the prosecutor or the defense counsel and how they keep on procrastinating. You know all these aspects and who is responsible for all this? But the judicial system. And you are the repository of the judicial system that is causing this law of the jungle per se, nationally and parliamentary point of view. So therefore I think the first corrective action that you're talking about is that judiciary itself has to wake up and make sure that they do not keep on allowing procrastination by the various prosecutors and defense counsel. Thank you, sir.
We have 44 lakh cases pending in the high courts and 2 crores in the lower courts. But this statistic is also matched by the fact that in America, a far less litigious system, they have 100 judges per million. The lowest is United Kingdom, which has 50 judges per million. We have a sanction strength of 25 and an actual strength somewhere between 12 and 14. And work management studies done on the judiciary have shown that if a judge has 2 cases or 3 cases, he will dispose of all 3. If you give him 30 cases, he will dispose of 0. And that's the problem today, overloading. And sir, let me assure you, our judges burn the midnight oil and give up in frustration. If we do not invest in the judicial infrastructure, it is no use blaming judges. We are not willing to pay adequate salaries. We are not willing to provide state-of-the-art facilities. And let me give you a very important example. Today in United Kingdom, they have created what is called legal tourism. $20 billion is what that country earns out of services on the commercial court. And in their commercial court, the figures are, out of 100 cases, only 15 have 2 British parties. And 50 out of 100 have no British party. They make money out of disposing of cases. That is where we have to get. We have to bolster our infrastructure, we have to add to judges, we have to add to their training and then blame them. I think yes, there is a problem in the judicial system. Why do public prosecutors procrastinate? See the quality of public prosecutors, see what you pay them, and see what their counterparts in other parts of the world get. So, if we invest in the infrastructure, we will get results. Why are our roads jammed? Because we don't have enough space. The courts are jammed for the same reason. You don't have enough judges, you don't have enough infrastructure. That, sir, is the real problem. And I have one last thing, sir. I have a problem with this expression, law of the jungle. The jungle has its laws and it rigorously adheres to them. It's only we humans who are lawless.
Yes, sir.
Here the talk proceeding, sir. The point I wish to make is the biggest problem we have, I know, in enterprises in the private sector is balancing the long term versus the short term. I am aware that's the biggest problem that capitalism faces, and that's one reason why capitalism, is in danger. The last point you made about everything being dependent upon, how well the leaders are able to follow the constitution. Everything depends upon that. Now, is that the solution to this problem?
Well, context. We have a neighboring country which has far higher growth rates than we do, which has had much greater success than we have had in the economic front. But they do not follow what we consider the basic rules of civil liberties. Well, that's a model. I do not subscribe to that model. I feel that model will never work in India. Mrs. Gandhi, who tried that for 2 years, paid a dear political price when we had the bogus emergency imposed on us. And I don't think any leader after that has even fantasized of toying with our liberties. We Indians are a free-spirited people. We are argumentative, we are noisy. I don't think can be governed in that way. So we are left with democracy, which by definition is an inefficient system. Any democracy is inefficient because it has to balance populism with doing the right thing. But increasingly, quietly but increasingly, the world has changed. And you talk of the private sector. Today the private sector is not what the private sector used to be 10 years back. The private sector 20, 30, 40, 50 years back was driven by promoters, rich families who set up industrial empires, each with a past. Today's capital comes from us, the pensioners, the middle class, savings, and that is managed by a group of professional bankers who invest funds, and they are today the most lucrative source of finance, and they are the ones who created instruments which allowed the huge economic growth. Of course, led to a bit of malfunction in 2008 and a part of the crisis. So the whole dynamic of private enterprise today has changed, and actually once it has happened in the Western world, where they realize that economics and the markets must be given primacy over day-to-day politics. That realization has to come into India if we need capital to break this vicious cycle of poverty. Capital today comes on its terms. That's, the gentleman asked me about the retrospective amendment. That is what the government has realized. If you do things which are hostile to capital, you are going to pay the price. And that realization has to come in. Short of that, doing away with liberties, I don't think will be the answer.
Last two questions.
Thank you for taking my question. Thank you for the dynamic parallels.
Kindly hold the mic a little closer.
Okay. Thank you for taking my question, and also thank you for the dynamic parallels between the US and Indian system. I live there, so I want to make some points. It's not a real question. There, what I've noticed is money is buying votes. They're going to spend like $4 billion in the next elections. Last time it was $1 billion. The informed electorates, they're not interested in looking at the details. Who's saying what? They just go by what television ad says. And at the same time, lobbyists, I'm sure you heard the name, lobbyists in Washington, D.C. And that is corrupting the system. I don't know what's being done in this country to address those aspects of well-informed electorate, the television ads, the role of money, etc.
The between US and India on the ground is that in US there was an acceptance that if this is a necessary evil, the only way to contain it is by transparency. So political parties have to disclose who has given them money. They have to disclose where the money is spent. They have to disclose how they are running their campaign. In India, and this is a problem which we have as Indians. We believe in a lot of hypocrisy. We sincerely sit and hear people extol virtues of honesty when we know exactly what they are doing is precisely the opposite. And I can share with you an anecdote which my father told me. In 60s, Mr. Chavan was the finance minister. That time, same amount of money compared to our GDP, but we pretend to be a pious lot.
Yes, sir, last question.
Point about the logjam in Parliament, about some of the parliamentarians in the opposition trying to block proceedings. I think one of the ways is to, I don't know how it is to be done, but what is to be achieved is, the sense of ethics and responsibility. I think nobody is really emphasizing that, and every parliamentarian of the opposition feels that by creating a ruckus he's going to get publicity. So my question is, what do you feel could be some of the actions done to make them more responsible?
Bringing this more onto a national platform. I just went to a function where two NGOs, two representatives of NGOs were there. And what they've been doing successfully and increasingly in elections, they go with a checklist which they distribute at election time. They say, we are not saying whom to vote for. We are saying this is the checklist. When the fellow comes to ask for your vote, please ask him, how many days did you attend? How many discussions did you take part in? How much have you spent out of your funds and for what development, etc., etc. Ask some hard questions, tick the boxes. And if you tick less than so many boxes, give somebody else a chance. This kind of movement has to gather currency, and today we have on social media, the big thing today is spreading your message today is easy and it is not very expensive. If we can develop this into citizens' movements, that is the ultimate answer in any democracy.
You to kindly show our acknowledgement of thanks to Mr. Salve in a moment.